What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another HR Heretics segment. Today, we have a segment from a listener, and it's from Karissa. So here's the note to us. Hey, big fan of the pod. I listen every week. My company is noodling on the idea of doing a bar raiser type of interview to ensure we hold our standards high for bringing in exceptional talent as we scale. So they're Series D, about 220 employees. She has heard mixed reviews on the bar raiser program. In theory, it's a good idea to have a trusted elite group of interviewers who assess leadership potential and look for other high agency people and hire the brightest hustlers who will push the company forward. I would love to hear what y'all have seen and done and hear an opinion or take on this one. So a couple of things on Amazon's bar raiser program from the website. So the goal is to bring objectivity into interview loops to fuel innovation at Amazon. Bar raisers are nominated by their peers, managers, or other bar raisers. They then have a training program. There's 3,600 of these people, and they have a couple of jobs. As an interviewer, they evaluate candidates against core competencies. As a decision driver, they drive excellent group hiring decisions through interview feedback, reference checking, so on and so forth. And then they teach other bar raisers. So Kelli, what is your take on this?
This phrase has been around for a long time. I think it's a very powerful term that I think a lot of leaders like, is what I think. And I think it comes with a lot of baggage, either positive or negative, based on people's experiences with it. What I think is that it's thrown around a lot, and it feels good to say we have a bar raiser process because that feels good. We hire the elite. We have this thing. And I think in a lot of cases, it is implemented really, really poorly. And there's not a lot underneath the term bar raiser. And I think it could be very confusing in organizations. So I'll be honest, there's a lot of folks that I've worked with and kind of chatted to, and they hear this term a lot. Implement this. I want this. Implement this bar raiser. And they kind of roll their eyes, just like, what do you mean? What do you want? So I think there's a lot of confusion out there. And if I finish this, I think we should rebrand it. I think we should figure out what do we want to do and call it something different that's very clear what it is.
Okay, so is your take then that the execution of it is actually okay, but the nomenclature is where there's problems? Or like, where do you land on like actually how, I guess let's talk about how Amazon does it and then how people can apply it to their own company. So how Amazon does it is, I think it's like less than 5% of the population. They're all cross-functional interviewers, and they're all focused on identifying, I think it's like the 17 principles that Amazon has for leadership. So these people come into interviews, they're not part of the team, and they're making sure that these people are better than 50% of the population. How do you feel about that specific aspect of it?
I feel like anything in any interview process, things can get away from you and bias can creep in. That's how I feel. So I do like the idea of having people in the organization that can do this and add value to interviewers, key term being objective third party, not a part of the team. I do think the term can, again, get away from people and be a little bit abused, misused, if you will, right? Like, let's talk about nominations, right? We say that referrals are one of the biggest ways to get non-diverse candidates or a workforce into the organization because you refer people that are like yourself. You're nominating peers to be bar raisers. It's hard because it can be very monoculture very quickly because you're nominating people that are like you. They're looking for the same things. And I think it could be very, very dangerous and get away from you if you're not constantly watching it and assessing it and curate it, if that makes sense. And there's one quote here. It says, the bar raiser interviews are the toxic flex that no one needs. And I think that term bar raiser comes with a lot of power, a lot of veto power and clout that can be misused. And I just think it has to be watched, right? Like when I was at Hired, we had values interviewers. We didn't use bar raiser. We had interviewers that are at all levels of the organization. They were a small subset. Yeah, probably about 10% of the company. Highly trained. We spent a lot of time with them. They understood how to ask questions, what to look for, how to dissect those things, behavioral interviewing. Then we just kept poking them, right? We kept poking them and made sure that they were extracting these things. And it was very clear what we were doing. We were trying to extract behavioral answers based on values that were very viscerally defined. You can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it. And again, that's my point. I just feel like this term bar raiser is thrown around. Go implement a bar raiser interview, and there's not a lot underneath it. So whether you use the bar raiser term or not, I just really encourage people to unpack it, be able to viscerally define it, smell it, touch it, feel it, and explain it, and not just kind of throw what they think are great superstar performers into veto talent.
Cool. So we tried this at DoorDash. The first idea of a name was Team Brita. So like, the Brita water filter. So like you can filter for top talent. And then I think we ended on like Team Red. And I think the idea of bar raiser makes a ton of sense. I think like the execution is where it gets really messy and it's hard to get right. And so I'll tell you what we learned. So essentially like what we were trying to optimize for is very similar to Amazon. Is like, we wanted to have our best people interviewing and like basically serving as like a gut check, especially as we were hyper growing. So I was there from 50 to 800. That happened over 3 years. You have to think about when you're in hyper growth, you tend to hire people and then immediately throw them in interviews, and they haven't been calibrated on like the interview process and what great looks like and what our bar is. And so there are real problems to solve, which we wanted bar raiser to solve. And I'll tell you where we landed on this. The problem was, number one, you burn out all of your best people. And so if you only have 5% of your population as bar raisers and they have to be part of every interview loop, they get burned out really fast because not only are they interviewing now for their team, which they have to hire for already, they're now interviewing for everyone else's team.
Hey everyone, we'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Real talk, most talent leaders haven't yet cracked how to leverage AI for meaningful impact on their hiring processes and business goals. But the leaders who are effectively using AI to transform their recruiting team's efficiency and quality use MetaView. MetaView is the AI assistant for the interview process. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations, like intakes, interviews, and debriefs, then provides perfectly summarized notes of everything that was discussed. That means your people can focus on creating human connections with candidates during calls and save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. But it's so much more than just a time saver, because perfect notes means perfect data. For every candidate and every pipeline, hiring teams can make confident, informed decisions, and talent leaders can finally take control of the interview process. Join forward-thinking talent leaders at high-performing organizations like Brex, HelloFresh, and Quora, and check out MetaView. Head over to metaview.ai/heretics to talk to one of MetaView's product experts, or get started for free. You'll be up, running, and AI-enabled in minutes.
Here's a crazy stat. Between hybrid and frontline employees, about 80% don't typically work in an office. So it's no surprise that digitally engaging employees is the number one concern for CEOs as companies go hybrid. But as hybrid is quickly becoming the norm, it's easy for workplaces to start feeling a little less human. Yet delighting a digital workforce is possible, and it can even be, dare we say, fun. That's where Workvivo, Zoom's employee experience platform, comes in. If you've ever recoiled at the thought of a static intranet that looks like something you built in 1995 using MS Paint, have no fear. Workvivo is a dynamic, intuitive, accessible, and mobile-first tool. People actually like using it, which is why companies like Ryanair, Dollar General, Virgin, and more have rolled it out to hundreds of thousands of employees. Workvivo's activity feeds, spaces, shoutouts, and live streams, among other features, help elevate the employee experience like never before. The result? Dramatically better retention, productivity, and most importantly, connectedness. A greater sense of the belonging we all crave at work, whether we sit at a desk or drive a truck. Make Workvivo the digital heart of your organization and achieve limitless human connection. Head to workvivo.com to book a demo and make sure you tell them that Nolan and Kelli from HR Heretics sent you.
And so they're not even like doing their core job. Problem number 2 is that like we like to use this term like objective, and I'm not sure like there is objective interviewing. It's just like it's all subjective, and I think it's like a little bit of like a joke to call it objective. So I tend to agree with you on that. And then problem number 3 is just like that you're exactly right. The nominating process of who these people are, how you pick them, how you continue to come, it just became a huge overhead. So what we did instead is we invested significantly into interviewer training. And and we really wanted to do this by team and by function to make sure that like at the very top of the org, that person who was running that org knew exactly what they wanted. And then the second order was we then created an offer review process. So it would, the recruiter and the hiring manager made the decision, want to hire. Then that approval would go through the org leader. Then the final approval would go through Tony, who is our CEO. And that way it was like the microscope was out, like every single aspect. We weren't burning people out. So, going back to what you said, Kelly, the thing I really agree with is what problem are you solving? Like, what is it that we are solving for? Is it to raise the bar? Is it to like have our best people interview? And then are you okay with the trade-off if it's like, hey, we want our best people as part of every interview? Are you okay with them like not working as much and doing real work and actually just spending more time on interviews? That's a real trade-off, and that's a real discussion to make.
Right. It's almost like it should be a full-time job, right? Like a SWAT team of folks that do nothing but this.
Right.
Because we had the same thing. They were like, I can't do this. I can't interview 6 people today and also sell.
Yeah. There were some other things that came up of like, well, I want to be compensated more for this stuff. And
right.
like, those are, those things like always come up. But I think the job of either a recruiting or an HR leader who either is thinking about doing this or gets pressure from a business leader to go implement it is to walk through the trade-offs of a program like this, and then also to walk through the alternatives. And so we've talked a little bit about the trade-offs, but like, your best people, are you okay with them not actually doing IC work and spending more time in interviews? Because that is the trade-off. Like they will be spending more time interviewing. And I'm actually for a little bit of time, I'm okay making that trade-off. But then to them, if you go and ask those people, this is the other thing that happened. Our best people weren't motivated by interviewing more candidates. Like they were motivated by doing deep work. And
correct.
They were getting pulled away from that work.
Yeah.
So I just think it's about a trade-off discussion and then evaluating what else that could help us solve this problem. Again, at DoorDash, we found that offer review and a multi-layered offer review ended up solving our problem, which was raising the bar and ensuring everyone coming through had like a microscope on their packet, which Tony and the org leader did a really good job of.
I think that's a really good example because I think it's very easy to get tangled up in this. And again, it gets away from you, right? It's very easy to get the adrenaline rush. We're going to do bar raises. We're going to put our best people in. And for me, I just go back to first principles. Why are we doing this? I'm assuming it's because you want objectivity, balance, and you want to ensure you get the best folks. Perhaps that's the best way to do that for your company is not to just pick 10 bar raisers and let them go wild. Maybe it's a multi-threaded offer process. Maybe it's job shadowing. And we talked about the work trials, which I don't like that term, but there's other ways to get at this. And so I think there's a lot of folks that hear about this and they just jump into bar raiser and they get very swept up in it. And the other thing that I'll say is that, and we talked about this, I'll use the parallel of not all star individual contributors are good leaders. Not all star performers are good interviewers. And again, I think there's a lot of folks where a lot of high performers, they have strong points of view. And I believe they have an innate bias to want to hire people that are like them. Not necessarily look like them, but they might act like them. They might have the same energy, right? These high performers that they might want to model after themselves. And then you get, again, more of a a homogeneous culture that way. And I'm not saying not to do it. I just am saying you have to be careful with it and monitor and continue to talk about it. Like anything, you can't just say, you're the bar raisers, go and talk to them twice a year. It has to literally be day in and day out. It's not really even train. It's like, how can you imprint how to do this on these folks? Because that's what founders want. Like, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to create 10 of them so they don't have to interview everyone.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think of like the slide, if I'm a recruiting leader presenting this to my CEO, who my CEO is like, go build the bar raiser program. Right. And so I would say like that, one slide is like, potential benefits. And then the other slide is like, potential downside trade-offs. And then it's like, what is the trade-off? Like what, and then how do we potentially manage that? So your point around bias, which you've mentioned a couple of times, I think that's fair, right? It's like, if we only have, white men, or if we only have early employees, right? They're going to bias towards people who either look like them or like are kind of like this. So like in the early employee example, like, and if we're scaling, like they're not going to know what good looks like at scale. And so you have to like constantly curate and be thoughtful. But one of the things you said, Kelly, was actually where I was going to go with it, is as part of the diligence for thinking about what program you're going to roll out and what is right for you, I strongly encourage leaders to go talk to the top performers and to get their feedback. So instead of just saying, hey, we're doing bar raiser, like this is what we're doing now, actually just go to your best people and say, look, we're scaling, or whatever your problem set is. We want to hire more people like you, but we also care deeply around, diversity or whatever your other goals are. What do you think we should do? Like, how do we have more, how do we have less false positives? And how do we hire more great people? And just like get the feedback from them, because if you take those sound bites and include it in your diligence deck to your CEO, they're going to listen to you a lot more to when you say, oh, well, Emily, who is like literally the best performer in the company, said we should test this thing. CEO, all of a sudden ears perk up and they're like, well, I love Emily. We should definitely listen to what she has to say.
Yeah, I think that is a great example of my last takeaway. If you take nothing away from this and your CEO says, I want a bar raiser program, don't go too slow, but go a little slow to go fast. And the first slide for me is in trade-offs. The first slide is interview your CEO and say, why? Why do you think we need this? What does it look like? Like if we had a great bar raiser program, what would be happening every day?
Exactly. What is the output?
What can you see, touch, and feel? Because I think a lot of folks get trapped in CEOs saying bar raiser, and they go and they do stuff and it either breaks other stuff, or the CEO is like, what is this crap? So try to go a little bit slow, unpack it, and then you could kick ass later.
Yeah. And then, in a world in which your CEO is like, go do this, Kelly. Like, I told you to go build a bar raiser program. Like, don't give me, Nolan's deck of outline. I don't give a shit about that. Like, go run this program. What you should actually do is start small, right? And we've said this a million times on this show, but like start small with an experiment, either within one team or one organization,
right?
And, go balls to the wall to make it happen there.
Yeah.
And then take the learnings from that, then go back to the CEO and say, hey, we did this in Eng. This is what, everybody in engineering said. This is what we learned. This would be the next steps for how we roll this out on a more broad base.
It's the best way to check the go box and not break everything at the same time.
Well, it's also the best way to not get your head chopped off, for the CEO who's like, I told you to go do bar raiser, and now you're coming back to me with a deck that says why we shouldn't do bar raiser. So are we misaligned? Like, am I not speaking the same language as you? Because I've certainly been involved in those conversations.
100%. You got to thread that needle. Different topic.
Totally.
All right,
everybody. Let us go test this out. Let us know what you think. Thank you so much for the question, and keep the questions coming.
Please. Bye all. Your workforce is both your organization's greatest strength and largest single cost. With Planful, it's easy to unlock the secrets of successful workforce planning so you and your HR team can make the right business decisions. Imagine using data-driven insights to develop accurate forecasts, close hiring gaps, and adjust talent acquisition plans collaboratively based on costs today and into the future. Planful lets you collaborate with colleagues in finance to understand the value your employees bring to the table. And the best part, you can get started with Planful in just weeks with minimal help from IT. Plus, with Planful, you get an endless runway. Planful grows with you, no matter how fast or large your team scales. Ready to transform your HR strategy? Join over 1,500 organizations worldwide who trust Planful as their go-to workforce planning software at planful.com/heretics.
HR Heretics is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Econ 102, Moment is Zen, and Turpentine VC. Subscribe, 5 stars, share it on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, all the things.